Numbered here. Today we're going to be doing Unit 5 Notes 1. So we are going to be learning about parts of a parabola and how to calculate out parts of the parabola. Now when I say parabola, I'm talking about this shape right here. It looks like an upside down U or a right side up U. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at just some things about a quadratic. A quadratic equation is anything that can be written in the standard form. Y is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. Now when we use quadratics, a, b, and c are all going to be numbers. The x squared and the x will always be in the equation, okay, as well as the y. So the graph of a quadratic is called a parabola. Okay, it's called a parabola. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at parabolas and let's just work on naming some parts of a parabola. So this guy right here is just the y-intercept. Just like on the line, when we graph lines, y-intercepts are where it crosses the y-axis. So parabolas also have y-intercepts. This right here, the bottom of this one and the top of this one is known as the vertex. Okay, so those are the vertex. Now, if it's a smiley face, if the parabola is opening up, the vertex then is a minimum. If the vertex is opening, or if the parabola is opening down, then the vertex is a maximum. Now, each of these, you'll notice, have a dotted line going through it. That dotted line represents the axis of symmetry. Now, it's called the axis of symmetry because it needs to be cutting the parabola in half in both directions. Okay, that's why it's the axis of symmetry, because it makes it symmetrical. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this first one. So each of these have a point called the vertex. This is the starting point when you graph the equation. Okay, this is the maximum or the minimum for the graph. So you can go ahead and fill in those words, okay? So you know that the vertex is going to be the maximum or the minimum. Taking a look at the next thing, okay? Notice that parabolas are symmetric. We have that axis of symmetry going through it. Okay, that's the invisible vertical line. Now, we actually draw it on the graph. We draw a dotted line, but it's technically not a part of our graph. We just dot it to help ourselves keep it symmetrical. So notice that the parabola, so it's called the axis of symmetry, this runs through the vertex and has the same value as the x coordinate. So that's how you're going to fill out that second one. Taking a look at the third bullet point here. So the point where the parabola crosses the y-axis is the y-intercept. That's the same as when we were graphing lines. This is the constant in the quadratic function. So the constant, remember, is the thing that is just a number. Taking a look at the last one, the graph will open up when a is greater than 0. So when I say a, we're referring back to the standard form of a parabola, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. So the a is the coefficient on that squared term. So it's opening up when a is greater than 0 and opening down when a is less than 0. So let's go through the steps of graphing a vertex of a parabola in standard form. So step number 1 is to write out your a, b, and c. Identify what a equals, what b equals, and what c equals. The next thing you're going to do is find the x coordinate. So you do that by using the formula x is equal to opposite of b over 2a. Then, taking a look at step number 3, you're going to take the x coordinate and you're going to plug it into the original function. Wherever there's an x, you're actually going to end up usually plugging it in twice because you're going to plug it wherever there's an x, and that will give you the y coordinate. Once you have an x and a y coordinate, you have a point, and that point is the vertex. So the biggest thing to take out of this, that the formula for axis of symmetry is opposite of b over 2a. That's the biggest thing to remember. Now, let's take a look at number 1. So number 1, we're going to get that a is equal to 2, b is equal to 8, and c is equal to a negative 3. Okay, a is always with the squared term, that's where I got the 2. B is always with the x term, that's where I got the 8. And then the constant at the end is a negative 3. So now we want to figure out if it opens up or down. Remember from the front side of your note sheet, it opens up if a is greater than 0. I see that a is positive, greater than 0, so I know my parabola is going to open up. So now I want to calculate out my axis of symmetry. So I'm going to use that formula opposite of b over 2a. Now notice that I'm saying opposite of b. So I'm going to take whatever the b is, which here is -8, and I'm going to do the opposite. Then I'm going to divide it by 2a, or 2 times 2. So when you go to simplify this out, you want to make sure you multiply out the bottom first. 2 times 2 is 4. Well, -8 divided by 4 is -2. So our axis of symmetry is -2. Now when we write out our axis of symmetry, we write it as an equation x is equal to. So x is equal to -2. Okay, so that's our axis of symmetry. So now to get our vertex, we need to plug in for x in the original equation. So the original equation was y is equal to 2x squared. So now instead of writing the 2, I'm going to write it as a -2. I put that in for the x. Plus 8, that's going to be times x minus 3. Okay, so all I did was substitute out all of the x's. So look at how I put that into my calculator, okay? Notice that I put parentheses around everything. If you have a nice calculator, whether it be the $15 scientific ones or even a graphing calculator, you can actually type it into your calculator exactly like this. If you use one of the crappy calculators that I have, it's going to take you a little longer. So you might want to consider investing in that for this unit. So you can take this and plug it straight into your calculator. And when you do that, you end up getting -11. So that's your y coordinate. So when we go to write out the vertex, we're going to write our x coordinate first and then our y coordinate. So we get the point -2, -11. Now the y-intercept is always going to be your c value. So your y-intercept is -3. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 2. So for number 2, our a is -3, our b is -6, and our c is 4. Remember, a comes from the square term, b comes from the x term, c comes from the constant. So we're going to use that opposite of b over 2a. Well, I noticed that b is a -6. So to do the opposite of a -6, it's going to be a +6. And we're dividing that by 2 times the a. So then I'm going to take the 6, and then I have 2 times a -3, which is a -6. When you take 6 divided by -6, you end up getting a -1. So now I know that that is my axis of symmetry, so I get that x is equal to -1. I forgot to do part B, so I noticed that a is negative. So since a is less than 0, my parabola is going to open down. So now I need to get my vertex. In order to get my vertex, I'm going to rewrite the equation. And wherever I see an x, I'm going to plug in a -1 instead. Now notice that when I'm plugging in a -1, I'm putting parentheses around it. That's really important when you're squaring a negative number to make sure you have parentheses around it. If you want to know why, feel free to come and ask. So then again, if you have a really good calculator, you can just plug that right on in, and you end up getting 7. I suggest whatever calculator you're using that you pause the video and try plugging that in right now to make sure you're getting the right answer. Okay, then so that's your vertex, and then your y-intercept is your c value. So my y-intercept is 4. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 3. So for number 3, a is equal to 1, b is equal to 2, c is equal to 18. Now I notice that my a is positive, so it's going to open up. So now I want to get my axis of symmetry, which is x is equal to opposite of b over 2a. So opposite of b over 2 times a. So -2 over 2 is going to give me a -1. So x is equal to -1. Okay, that's going to be my axis of symmetry, is that x is equal to -1. And we always do x is equal to every single time. So now we know that what's x is equal to. So now I'm going to go back, and for every x I see in that equation, I am going to plug in -1 instead. Again, notice that I'm putting parentheses around those as I plug it in. Now if you have a good calculator, you can go ahead and just plug this in. And that's going to give you 17. So your vertex, first your x coordinate, then your y coordinate. Last but not least, your y-intercept is your c value, so my y-intercept is 18. Last but not least, let's take a look at number 4. So for number 4, I noticed that there is no x term. So that means that my b is 0. A lot of students like to put 16 for b because it's the second term. But remember that b always goes with the x term. Since there is no x term, my b is 0. That means my c, or my constant, is 16, and my a is 2. Since my a is positive and greater than 0, it's going to open up. Now I need to get my axis of symmetry, so I'm going to do opposite of b over 2 times a, and I get 0 over 4, which is equal to 0. So my axis of symmetry is x is equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and write my axis of symmetry. Now I need to plug that in. So I have y is equal to, now wherever I see an x, I'm going to put in a 0. So y is equal to 2 times 0 squared plus 16. Well, that's going to give me 16. So my vertex, first my x is 0, my y is 16. Then I need to look at my y-intercept. Well, my y-intercept is my c value, which is 16. So that is your note sheet for today. Go ahead and make sure you're asking me questions when you're done. Thanks for listening.